Welcome to your March Madness betting guide. I have 9 trends in this video that will help you bet all of March Madness, but also I will show you how I've picked 3 of the last 6 tournament champions. The first trend we have is this blind betting of first half unders. In the first half of games since 2011 in the first round, first half unders are 57% winners to the under. You've got 258 wins, 193 losses, and 17 pushes. So you can literally just click first half under for the first 32 games and end up profitable. This is this trend since 2011. Now, why does that trend hit? I think there's a few factors. You've got weird start times, weird travel times, and then you've got the nerves. And what happens? Good defense prevails over good offense. You've also got advanced time to scout. Teams are more specific, maybe taking away certain things from certain teams. Your best player, you've got a situation where you take away his left hand because he's always driving to his left. Those are the things that in a regular season game, you're probably not advanced scouting as much, and then you're really diving in. That is trend number 1. Number 2 is really helping me with my brackets, but it's also going to eliminate a couple contenders and maybe give you a couple upset picks early on. And this one is one of my favorites from KenPom. So KenPom has shown a team that starts outside the top 25 preseason AP and then finishes as a 1 or a 2 seed. So this applies to Michigan State and it applies to St. John's. Those teams win on average less than 2 games. This is not teams that start outside the top 25 and finish in the top 25. These are teams that finish as a 1 or a 2 seed. They win less than 2 games on average. And this goes back to many different teams that you might have thought were going to advance far in your bracket. These are teams that just don't have talent. And that's why they were not ranked inside the top 25 to begin the season. They might have played incredibly well. They may have figured out, a star on the bench that they weren't expecting. But overall, you need talent to go and win 6 straight games. And these are the things that those teams tend to be lacking, and that's why they were outside that AP top 25. Now, I will throw a little caveat in there. I don't think it's perfect because of the addition of the transfer portal, but the last few years where the portal has obviously opened up, where you can transfer in and play the same season, the trends have still applied. And so we've seen teams like Purdue, who were outside the top 25, go ahead and lose in what I consider to be paper tigers, but that is actually trend number 3. So a paper tiger is a term coined by, I believe, Preston Johnson, Sports Cheeto on Twitter. And a paper tiger refers to a team that's really good on one side of the ball, but really bad on the other. And in this case, there's 4 paper tigers in this year's tournament, and 3 of them are coming from the SEC. Missouri, 6th in raw offense, 158th in raw defense. Alabama, 9th in raw offense, 176th in raw defense. Purdue, 15th in raw offense, 192nd in raw defense. And Kentucky, 17th in raw offense, 191st in raw defense. Now, I believe paper tiger tracking began around 2001, 2002. Up until 2 years ago, a paper tiger had never even made it to the Final Four. They have gone on a couple lucky runs recently with Miami a few years ago and then Alabama, I believe, last year. Those situations are outliers, and that's what we're looking for when we're betting the tournament, when we're picking our futures, or when we're making our brackets. These are the teams that look really strong on paper, but actually they have serious flaws, and obviously being so good on offense and so bad at defense is a major flaw. That is one of those things that while St. John's isn't in that category, it's what eliminates them from contention. They're 60th in offense, and the teams that win titles are top 25. I'm sure you've seen the KenPom stats, and top 40 in defense. So those are paper tigers. Now, a lot of the information I'm going to be referring to throughout this video, that's going to be stuff coming from Preston, Evan Abrams, Dalton Cates, and of course, John Boy. John Boy, there's not trends. Well, he uses a lot of trends, but I'm just going to have this up on the screen right here, right now. Go give him a follow. His Thursday and Friday threads are incredible. He's been on an insane hot streak since he started, releasing this content, and he's playing the trends. And while I'm not a huge fan of trend-based betting in general because I think we'll get situations where it's like the Eagles are 8-4 against the spread against the Packers since 2006 when they're playing in below 30 degrees. But those are different teams, right? And what's unique about this is the sample size is you're not betting 6 playoff games. There's 70 plus tournament games going on, there's 65, 68 tournament games that are going to be played. You actually get to bet into a decent sample size here. And if you follow these trends year over year and also analyze them as to why they apply, and that's what we tried to do at the beginning with the first half unders, and why I think those have been hitting at such a high rate. Now, if you follow them, you could say the market has adjusted and you're seeing more value on the over. I don't think it has quite yet. Now, there's one more category, and this one comes from my guy Dalton Cates, and these are the late bloomers. Now, this is a slightly different category, and the red flag with late bloomers are teams that weren't good to start the season and have actually finished up pretty strong. So BYU has jumped 31 spots, Michigan up 11 spots, and Oregon up 13 spots. Now, these are teams that maybe just got hot during a tourney run or during the back half of their conference schedule. The fact that they haven't played good basketball all year, most of the time is going to say they're not great teams. And I think that is why UC San Diego is a really trendy pick right now. They're all the way down to plus 2.5 against Michigan. Michigan goes on this tourney run, a lot of hype, but the committee only had them as a 5 seed. And that's because I think their whole body of work hasn't been as impressive as you might remember them as the Big Ten tournament champions. With that being said, here's another trend for you, the 12-5 upset. When the trendy pick happens, seeds of 12 or higher in the round of 64, who are either a favorite, which applies to Colorado State against Memphis, or an underdog of 4 points or less, like I said, UC San Diego plus 2.5. They are 0-5 against the spread since 2020 and 4-8 against the spread over the last decade. So this one's a little tricky if you're going to bet that San Diego-Michigan game. Maybe Michigan actually ends up covering this game and then goes and loses next round as that late bloomer red flag rears its ugly head. But these aren't things that you just want to bet into blindly. It's just a good base of information to kind of make your picks off of and be knowledgeable about. The one thing that maybe you do want to bet blindly, this is not gambling advice, but maybe it should be, the Mountain West Conference. You're going to see it sprayed everywhere. I'm recording this the night after UNC just blasted through San Diego State, another Mountain West team. They're atrocious in the tournament. There's no way to put it. They are 12-34 against the spread in the first 4 and round of 64 since 2009, including 3-17 against the spread since the 2019 tournament. You know what makes that so unreal? San Diego State went to the national championship. So when you think about it, the Mountain West, if you were to pull that from that SDSU run from the Mountain West, they might not have covered a game in 6 years. So avoid the Mountain West. That one, I'm not going to lie, I can't even give you the analysis for it. I don't think they're worse as a conference and they just beat up on each other and so they look really good. I don't really know what it is. But the trend is pretty simple here. Fade the Mountain West Conference. You've got 4 Mountain West teams in the tournament. If you don't know them, probably shouldn't be betting, but Google it. It takes you about 2 seconds. The next trend is on free throw shooting. So there is a known quantity here, which is teams who have a large gap, large edge in free throw shooting actually cover the games more. Now, that might seem pretty obvious, and I guess for good reason it is. And this applies to Gonzaga, minus 6.5 against Georgia, Oregon, minus 6.5 versus Liberty, Colorado State, minus 2.5 versus Memphis. I would be careful with that. That's Mountain West and our 12-5 trendy upset. VCU, plus 3.5 versus BYU. That's a pick that John Boy, who I mentioned earlier, he's on VCU money line as well. And then Vanderbilt, plus 3.5 versus St. Mary's. This one is pretty simple. When the team is better from the free throw line than their opponent, and it's by at least a little bit, they're going to cover more often. And that's because in the tournament, you got to make your free throws. They're free. They are the difference in the margins, especially in covering, definitely in winning. The one I just mentioned, Oregon minus 6.5, they are 8-0 straight up under Coach Dana Altman. That's straight up though. So are they covering? That's still to be determined. But some other coaching notes for you. Rick Barnes, 5-17 against the spread in tournament games since 2010. I would not be putting my money on Rick Barnes in March or April, but he has been a top seed over the years, which means not only is he 5-17 against the spread, but he's losing those games straight up. On the other side of the coin, Dan Hurley, they've covered 12 in a row. The UConn Huskies have not only won back-to-back titles, but they've covered every single game. Because of that, they're 15-3 against the spread in his tenure at UConn. And then John Calipari is 20-3 straight up in the first round. They're underdogs. Arkansas is an underdog to Bill Self. I take that one with a major grain of salt because obviously Calipari's teams, normally Kentucky, normally Memphis, where they're at the top of the seeding and going to be huge favorites straight up in the first round. Okay, we've made it towards the end. And it's time to talk about how I've selected 3 of the last 6 champions. UConn, most notably 2 years ago. I actually didn't have them last year. Major mistake. A little bit of an overthought there. But you want to learn from your mistakes. The first thing to look at is teams who do not cover, at least in their first or second game, do not win the championship. So there actually is something to Vegas saying, all right, this is how much better this team is than the other team. We need them to overperform that. So for a 1 or a 2 seed who might be a 15-point favorite and then they're a 7-point favorite, if they get through but don't actually cover either of those games, there's only one team since 1985 who went 0-2 against the spread and then went on to win it all. That was Arizona in 1997. That was also the last team west of Texas. That is a perfect example of a trend. The team west of Texas to win a championship, that applies to nothing. There is nothing that you could say that there's a reason why East Coast teams or middle of the country teams are winning championships. That is out of pure luck. So if you do really think Arizona is going to win the title this year, don't not bet on them just because they're west of Texas, because that line will keep moving. And if I'm not wrong, I believe it was like west of Kansas and then Baylor won, so they added Texas. So that's a trend to avoid. And that's another thing to be conscious of, is what trends to pay attention to, what trends to bet, and what trends to obviously dismiss. Another one, 20-1 or more. I know it's fun. You can pick Wisconsin, who's one of my favorite futures or teams that can make a run. You like Maryland at 40-1. There's some really fun teams that are totally live in this tournament, but they don't win the tournament, right? So no team has won the title over 20-1 since UConn in 2014, and they're one of the outliers, right? It's not like there was a run of them before 2014, and it's just been 11 years. Like, they're the outlier. So teams don't come from out of nowhere. We know that no 8 or 9 seed has really ever won the championship. It tends to be those top teams. It's called March Madness, even though the tournament goes into April, because the madness happens in March. It happens in the first 2 rounds. Fairleigh Dickinson goes to the Sweet 16. Fairleigh Dickinson isn't going to the championship at 4,000,000-1, right? So especially in this year, and I'm sure if you're watching this video, you've also seen every single tweet and post and article about the top 25 KenPom and the efficiency on defense and all those things. That's because the best teams tend to win the national championship, and the best teams tend to be priced accordingly. On top of that, we've got some of the best teams that we've ever seen in college basketball from an efficiency standpoint. Duke rates out as one of the most efficient teams that we've ever seen, definitely in the last 10 years. Auburn is up there, Florida is up there, and Houston is up there. And who are those teams? They're the top 4 seeds. So with that being said, I went chalk in my bracket, and I did end up with all 4 of those teams in the Final Four. The team I would have picked against if I had to would be Auburn, but I just don't think that there is a great path to them losing. They could obviously lose to Louisville or Creighton on Saturday, and I look like an idiot, but for the most part, especially when I'm picking in the brackets, I'm letting others make the mistake, and then I'm trying to find maybe those dark horses, or I'm getting rid of Michigan State early. I'm getting rid of St. John's early. I'm getting rid of Alabama early. I'm getting rid of those late bloomers like Michigan and the paper tigers like Alabama, and then I'm picking the teams that are really strong. So with that Final Four, I feel like I've edged you guys on here, and I feel bad about it. I don't love a future bet. I really don't like any of the value here. I am leaning towards Houston at this current moment. I haven't even picked my champion, but that's all to say, this stuff, there is not a underlying metric that I think you're going to get an edge on this year. While there is chaos, while there is madness, there has been signs in the past of teams that are going to win the title. I don't think we can say today if any team won, I'd be surprised nor shocked about it. And that applies to all four of those 1 seeds. Now, if you want to really dig through it, I will give you a couple things. Number one, Duke. They are pretty close to that line of their strength of schedule. I believe they're 56th in like net schedule rating. That's pretty bad compared to what previous champions have done. And then the other side of that 1 seed is Houston. They would play in the Final Four. Houston, they have a stronger defense, number 2 in the country, and only the 10th best offense. What we've looked at in the past is you need to have a good defense, elite offense. And so when the margins get as slim as they are in the Final Four with 4 1 seeds, like I'm projecting, maybe that's something that points to a Florida or to a Duke or even to an Auburn, where the offense is their strong suit and the defense is still elite. It's still top 10, top 15 for all those teams. But maybe that's what stops Houston in its track, just needing to get a few more buckets down the stretch. Plus, I want to be on Houston, but the coach has just not had that success. So you've got Shire, you've got the Houston coach, and that Sampson, and then who else do we have? We have the Florida coach is pretty young. So, you know, if you like the experience in coaching, which I always love experienced coaches, experienced players, we know Auburn has that. I think they're in the weakest quadrant, and they lost 3 or 4 to end the season, but they still have a very strong body of work throughout the season. So I might have just talked myself into Auburn. I'm going to continue to do some research up until noon when those games tip off on Thursday. And another thing you can do, because I'm rolling with the 1 seeds, their odds aren't going to change a ton throughout. They're going to be favorites in every game throughout the tournament. Maybe they pick up playing, you know, instead of the 4 in the second round, they play the 13 in the Sweet 16. So different things like that could increase their odds. But for the most part, you could wait and you could see, what is an injury going to do? How is Flagg's ankle before you really go in? And I'd rather know if Cooper Flagg's on a healthy ankle before I bet on a plus 300, plus 350 future than get it in pre-tourney. So those are all my tips and trends. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, and best of luck in your March Madness betting.